This is Kadika, OER, PRSC. The title of this is Historical Research, Historiography, Systematically Recapturing the Past. Introduction. Definition of historical research, sources in historical research, steps in historical research, importance of libraries, examples of examining primary sources. Here's a source on the right called History and Historical Research by C.G. Crump. Definition of historical research. Systematically recapture complex nuances of the past, explore people, meanings, events, and ideas. Understand how the past has influenced and shaped the present. Sources of historical research. Primary sources consist of original documents, artifacts, and eyewitness accounts. Secondary sources cover books, articles interpreting primary sources. Some detail about historical research. We're going to focus on certain aspects, but not all here. So we're going to focus on primary sources created at the time of the event. Majority primary sources are created at the time of the person that's being talked about, of the event, of the idea, etc. Some things that cover primary sources or components of primary sources are visual artifacts, oral records, unpublished documents, and published documents. Historical researchers also use census data, and this dealing with demographics, population demographics, etc. Historical maps speaks about, the evolution of maps and the accuracy of those maps. Secondary sources are created later. They're like peer-reviewed data, books, peer-reviewed books, where scholars are giving inference on primary data, an idea, a research project, a research question, etc. So they will publish books or even look at the sources of those published books. They will also look at the sources of journal articles. Of course, these books and journal articles must be looked over and be vetted in a credible journal that has a peer review, rather open access, or even traditional. So these are a few steps of historical research. One is to identify an idea, topic, or question. Conduct a background literature review. Refine the research idea and questions. Determine what historical method is suitable. Identify and locate primary and secondary data sources. Evaluate the authenticity and accuracy of source materials. Analyze the data and develop a narrative exposition of the findings. Importance of libraries. Museum, university, or public libraries are suitable for the historian researcher. Libraries provide access to raw data, unpublished manuscripts, and back copies of journals and newspapers. To give a quick example of historical methodology, is say we have a research question and we say, which is a valid question, did the Egyptians describe themselves and sub-Saharan African Nubians as Black? The answer to that question will be, according to primary sources, the ancient Egyptians described themselves and sub-Saharan Africans, Nubians, as Black or dark-skinned. So to tackle this and see if this answer is accurate, we will evaluate primary sources. In Egyptian, they have periods. So we will focus on the Old Kingdom text. In this Old Kingdom text is a rock inscription of the Old Kingdom, Sinai, Wadi Magada. And in this region, as you see on the right, this is a copy of the actual artifact. So actual copies are also considered primary sources, even though they are copies. On your left is a transliteration of this copy. So this is still considered a primary source. And then the meta-nature on the right is transliterated here and then translated into English, in which we see a Egyptian is described as the black. The glyphs read Sabi, and you see the determinatives of a man, and then you see the adjective modifier following the man, indicating that this man is the black, or considered a black man or dark man. This is also primary material, and these are examples of how we can answer the research question by looking at others in a comparative text analysis. So as you see here, this is a grave inscription of the Old Kingdom Sakata, Nakawi EC burial complex. And this is also Old Kingdom. But here you see kind of the color of the phenotype of the ancient Egyptians during this period, or this particular group of Egyptians. And it's this particular group of Egyptians, or Nile Valley Africans, you have dark-skinned Egyptians. And at the bottom, you would have a copy of the actual artifact or inscription. And as you see, this is also a transliteration of that primary source. And it's also the translation of it. And it states his eldest son, his lover, his only friend, Nakao Teddy, the dark-skinned. So they are describing themselves as black. So instead of coming up with my own inferences, we look at primary data to answer complex questions. So here is a New Kingdom text. And in this New Kingdom text, we do a comparative analysis. So we compare Old Kingdom text, we see two Egyptians being described as black. And when we compare it with the New Kingdom text, we see Nubians being described as black with the same adjective modifier. And here you see the transliteration. And it will read Nehisi I Kim, or Nehisi I Kim, which would read Great Black Nubian. So both Egyptians and Nubians were described the same. So comparative analysis, both Egyptians and Nubians, so-called sub-Saharan Africans, are described as black Kim using the primary adjective. So we see Ramesh, so-called Egyptians, described as Kim, black, and Teti Cemetery, Old Egyptian, or in the Old Dynasty or the Old Kingdom period. And we see the Nakau Isisi, Kim. Kim follows Nakau Isi, sort of like Spanish, and where you say Casablanca, and Blanca follows Casa and changes the noun. So here you see the translation is Nakau Isi, the black, dark-skinned elder. B, you have Nehisi, so-called Negro, Nubian, described as Kim, black in New Kingdom text. And you see Nehisi Akim, Paya Ek Caprio, meaning being your appearance like the great black Negro or the great black Nubian. So both Egyptians and Nubians were described in primary materials. So this is an example of how a historian would use primary materials and seek the ideal research question, event, or person or meaning from scanning primary artifacts, materials, copies of those primary artifacts, and using them to answer complex questions. This is the end. Enjoy. Here are some of the references I used. Thank you.